Welcome to Attention Retention with Jackie McManus, your source for the latest trends in transportation recruitment and retention.
Welcome, everyone, to an exciting episode of Attention Retention. I'm Jackie McManus, CEO and founder of KJ Media. We're a recruitment advertising agency specializing in talent attraction, optimizing hiring processes, and driving efficiency to help grow your workforce in the trucking industry. And on this show, we explore the world of recruitment, retention, and recognition by interviewing industry leaders, experts, as we dive into strategies, challenges, and the successes of workforce management. This week, I am thrilled to be joined by Brad Hackett, Director of Recruiting and Safety at Jett Express. Brad, thank you so much for being here today.
Super pumped to be here. Thanks for having me, Jackie.
Yeah, and Brad, you really are a recruiting retention leader and have really developed measurable results across every stage of the full driver life cycle, from the front end, from the ad side to retaining the driver to then recognizing the driver. So from cutting costs to lowering turnover and building wait lists, really have shown a strategic recruiting strategy, thoughtful retention, and genuine recognition. With those three can really transform a company's outcome. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on the show. You're passionate about the industry and moving beyond the volume and into quality-driven growth. And philosophy is clear. Focus on recruitment success starts with clarity, accountability, recognition. But before we dive into the big three R's, can you walk the audience through your career path and to where you're at in your currency today?
Yeah, absolutely. I started right out of college as a dispatcher. So I was a dispatcher, both night transportation and sell-it-on trucking here in Indianapolis. So I spent my first decade in trucking on the ops side of the business, being thrown every which way, figuring out problems, and really just developing those relationships with people, learning on the fly, and that love and passion for the really good drivers in our industry from there. And then 5 years ago, right in the heart of COVID, I was plucked to figure out this wild world of driver marketing, recruiting, onboarding, and retention side of things. So been both full-time and consultative capacity at several major carriers here in the Midwest during that time, and was thrilled to join full-time the Jett Express team late last year as the Director of Recruiting and Safety. And as you mentioned, I'm sure we'll go through, we've had immense success implementing some of these strategies and just doing the right things, the hard things, right and consistently there.
Mm-hmm. The right and the hard things. A fun fact, I'm not sure if you know this about me, I joined the trucking industry right out of college, 2008. So I was hired for recruiting at the time because I used to do sales for DHL. And so I joined the company in recruiting. And the first month, the company put me in dispatch. And they were like, This is where you're going to learn. And I learned how to speak trucking French very quickly. But still this day, I always I'm so grateful for that opportunity to sit in dispatch before going into the recruiting side of the business to really get the holistic overview of what that looks like, the communication to drivers once they're already with the company. And so, just like you started a dispatch, and then it was a great part of my career. So as we kick off the three R's, we're going to start with recruitment. And with recruitment strategies, there are so many different methods to finding drivers online, but a big focus that you and I talk about often is really the quality. But before we really dive into that, what have you found over your career to be more of the successful approaches to attracting and recruiting drivers in today's market?
There's a couple things that stick out. One is defining as an organization, what is a clear persona of the type of driver or drivers that you're trying to recruit. It seems silly, but so many times people just want to jump in, throw an ad out there, and then figure it out, whatever comes. But by taking a step back, looking at that whole picture of this type of driver in this specific scenario, this far along in their career with this career background, being able to really hone in on what we can define as a home run hit, and then your advertising campaign targeted to that. That's what we continue to partner with KJ Media today here at Jett. Really, that quality approach of that the more time up front in defining that and targeting that, but you may get a little bit less lead volume, but it's a lot higher quality that you can convert at a more consistent rate. So starting off with that clear persona, and then I'm really passionate about process and communication. Drivers are making a huge decision, making a potential change to come to your organization. So developing that clear and concise communication from that first interaction to every step until they get hired on and beyond, really massaging that professionalism and consistency in your communication. And last step on that is just making sure you have those clear steps of, hey, we had our first call today. Sounds like a fantastic fit.
Right.
I need that CDL and med card to get you approved with our insurance. Can you get me that when you stop for your break here in an hour? And delivering on what you promise on that.
Yeah, and let's start with the clear persona, because that is often overlooked. And for example, when we talk to new potential trucking companies to partner with, that's a question I ask: is what is your ideal persona? And a lot of times we get the head scratching in the room, like, well, we need 2 years of experience, we need hazmat. And so I understand the qualifications that are needed. Absolutely, the black and white of the job description. What does that driver look like? Where do they live? What demographic are they in? And really going through the process of the drivers that have been with your company for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, depending on the amount of time the company has been around. Who are they? Who and where are they? Right. And so it's interesting because that is something on, I always think recruiting and sales are somewhat similar, and I had history in sales myself, still do, but they are similar. And so when you think about it, when you're looking at B2B, right, you're of course identifying who's your ideal client profile, your ICP. And so that's something that we see when you marry the concrete details with the abstract, is what I like to say, with the family, the relationships between dispatchers and drivers, marrying those, what those drivers, where they live, what they eat, what they wear. That's where you're going to have that solid messaging that is going to be able to resonate with your ideal driver for them to apply. And I'd be curious because, like I mentioned, sometimes it's a little bit of a head scratch in the room. What would you say would be the first steps for a company that they could take to go beyond the black and white of their job description to nail down who their ideal candidate is?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The hard part is kind of getting beyond those tangibles, right? I mean, the insurance wants this much experience, this and that. I think starting with the intangibles of the communication style, the where they live, kind of a background. I had a recent example. We're hiring. We had a wait list right now, but I was hiring for our Chicago and back, our pharmaceutical division. It requires really efficient rule following. We have to follow specific routes. We have to be on top. These are multi-million-dollar shipments, so a lot of consistent check-ins, communication with those loads. I was talking to a gentleman. He was like right on the edge of our hiring area, so he would have had to commute like over an hour to get to a home daily job. So not crazy, but kind of a far commute. And then as we got talking more and more, he really liked being like out on the open road, going at his own pace, his own thing. And we spent 5 minutes, and I basically talked him out of applying with us. And I would much rather spend that time up front and being open and honest about what it's going to take to succeed, what we expect from you early on. So that time was well spent for me, instead of hiring that driver and then him figuring out a couple weeks in that it's not really a good fit for his style. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And that's really coming down to nailing down your ideal candidate and having maybe that tough conversation in the beginning, and make sure it's a good fit, not only for Jett, but also for the driver,
right,
versus leaning more towards being a good fit for maybe Jett during that time, But then realistically, the driver's probably going to look for another opportunity if he has to drive X amount of hours to get to the terminal every day, right? And so
Right.
key factors are just they're critical. Second thing you mentioned was communication, and we have seen at KJ working with hundreds of trucking companies that piece, communication time and the response time can really make or break a hire. And so I'd be curious, what when you think about candidate communication, what touch points matter most for looking at a driver that just applied and bringing them through the process?
It's tough, and it's going to be unique to your specific organization. We've had great success, again, with KJ Media, the advertising. We do some pre-screening to make sure they're going to hit some of the key areas before it even hits our ATS. And then we partner with Double Nickel. There are several great ATS clients out there that work for unique needs, but we absolutely love Double Nickel. And I utilize their automation that I can set up my own persona and my own automation from a text message standpoint, and then layer on a very custom virtual assistant AI tool that is doing some of that upfront vocal communication in our structure today. But I'm constantly running tests, seeing what's engaged with, what's working well, and making some fine-tune adjustments over time. But we found success on getting that quick connection right at the point of hire with a virtual assistant. And then that equips me as a recruiter and one-man show with a lot of different roles here at Jett to have a really high-quality turnover from your bringing your leads to full apps and down the hiring process. So that high conversion rate with that, and really high-quality conversations because they've already been semi-vetted with KJ before they hit the ATS, and then they've been vetted with my virtual assistant, and then they're setting up that time that works well with them to have a one-on-one conversation with me where it's a real high-quality conversation many times out of not.
That makes sense. And you said the word equipped, the virtual assistant really equips you. And I love the way you phrase that, because when we talk about the virtual assistant, the virtual recruiter, to folks that there's trucking companies that may have not had that implemented yet or just exploring it, sometimes the recruiters may be a little shy about it, meaning, is this going to take my job? Or what? A little bit of a risk comes into play, right? And I always like to think of it as, hundreds of years ago, CPAs or accountants, before there was calculators, they were doing everything by hand. And then a calculator came, and then Excel came. And so it just streamlined their workflow, and is meant to really have those engaging conversations versus not having those conversations, or getting ghosted by the driver, or losing them to another carrier because 15 leads came in that day and you can only make so many phone calls in that time. So I'd love to hear your overall advice on recruiters that are interested but maybe a little skeptical.
Yeah, that's something I'm very passionate about as well. Is I think a lot of people have taken AI, and of course it's a buzzword, and of course there's so many tools out there, but they're approaching it with what can we replace instead of how can we support what we've got going on today, or take what something is really going well today and take it to the next level. So that's what I really enjoy, and I'm very upfront and honest that it is an AI virtual assistant. So it's not trying to replace a computer or try to fool a driver into thinking they're talking to a recruiter, as I've seen some other companies trying out. And then again, it's equipping me with that detailed conversation transcript and that recording of what was said, so that I can do a super efficient 1 minute of prep before that phone call and see the entire detail of their application, their transcript with the AI, and also saving me time in vetting out those candidates that don't meet our qualifications. If they don't have a CDL, that tool can automatically disqualify them and save me the time, effort, and energy of wasting that couple-minute phone call.
Absolutely. Well said. I want to now go into the third step that you said here was the clear steps I like to think about as expectation setting but very clear to the driver. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And for companies that may not have that implemented or think they may have it implemented, but for example, a client you started working with, their recruiters are just they're phenomenal. They're beasts. What we found though is that they had scheduled orientations on Tuesday, every Tuesday and Thursdays. They'd have 30 drivers scheduled, 10 would show up. And so we started breaking down that process, and it came down to the clear communication and the expectations. So I'd love to dive a little deeper and get your experience on what advice you give for trucking companies that maybe experience that or would like to look at revamping that approach.
Yeah, there was some great data. I was at a 10th Street User Conference a couple of years ago, and their data shows, and I'm sure this is equivalent in most ATSs, but it's very often that drivers are applying to 3 to 5 plus different carriers as they're weighing their options, talking with their family, seeing what the market is, looking for the next move. That's, again, a really big decision for them. So if you take a step out and you put yourself in that driver's shoes, they're getting bombarded. They're getting phone calls, they're getting text messages, they're getting emails. If you can imagine how much you're sending out and then multiply that by 5 or more, their inbox, their text message, they're overwhelmed. So by breaking it down, kind of slowing down a little bit once you have that engagement and really kind of walking them through what is going to be a fit, making sure that they remember talking with Brad at Jett Express, particularly out of those conversations, and then giving that semi-homework assignment of deliverables that you can gauge their engagement on how much they're interested in the position, and that you could show them that you can be trusted, that you're going to deliver on what you promise from that first step onward there.
Yeah, that's well said. And I have a question for you. Recruiters face so many hurdles in the industry, and some we just kind of discussed with the overall process itself. What advice would you give to a new recruiter that's joining our industry? And maybe they're recruiting from another industry or fresh into our industry. What advice would you give to them, as they embark on their career in the trucking industry?
You always want to tell the truth, always open with that. Drivers have the biggest BS detector of any industry I've ever heard of, which is great. So you never want to lie or be facetious or try to hide key elements of the job. They're going to pick up on that extremely quick. But also you want to work with your team, either your recruiting manager if you're working on a bigger team, or if you're jumping into a smaller team and maybe the executives have the need that you're trying to fulfill. You want to really lay out and get to know the data. So you want to know, how long does it take us to put an ad out to get a driver hired? How many on average do we need to get leads in this area to convert them to a hire? That's been really powerful for me over the years, and with some guidance of great mentors, is setting even the ownership team that they want a quick fix. They always want a quick fix, but aligning on fair expectations of, here's what it's going to take for us to meet these goals, and I want to be upfront and honest, and this is what it really takes with the data, and I want to be held accountable to deliver the results needed. But not setting yourself up for false expectations of really quick fixes that, unfortunately, I've found a lot of desperation operations team or executives want to see they want 10 hires for $10. It's just not going to work, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think the data-driven approach, the strategies, on average, if you have 20%, 30% turnover, I'm going to need to spend this much in media in order to get XYZ results, and it will take this amount of time. And so you're proactively recruiting versus the, oftentimes I call it very reactive recruiting in our space, where it's, we'll get a phone call from an owner of a trucking company and say, hey, we need 15 drivers yesterday. And so happy to help, but we just got to break that down a little bit so that we don't have that conversation this month from that too, right?
Yeah. One more thing to add that's super important for those recruiters is you should know each of the positions that you're hiring for like the back of your hand. So whether that's tools that you have to build or hopefully your team has something in place, you should have for each of the positions where you can hire from, the details, who to contact operationally for some of those edge case questions, and continue to build on that over time. that's going to build your confidence. It's going to build your sales approach with the driver, but you really should be building on that knowledge base internally for each of those positions on what they're going to expect with the position. It just makes you even better and even more high quality in those engagements with the drivers.
Absolutely. And one thing you said, and it's I think I nodded in my head pretty aggressively, is that drivers will, smell the what. And so it is so critical with that first conversation with the driver to be fully armed, kind of overarmed with information, if you will, and dictate the conversation based off of that particular driver. I often say that we're recruiting to or advertising on the advertising side 5 different generations of drivers. And so they all communicate differently. As we know, every generation communicates differently. The younger generation, if you give them a phone call, they're not going to answer. But the older generation, they want to talk on the phone. They want to learn more also before filling out a full application, right? And so those are some key ways to kind of, as a new recruiter, really just holistically bring everything together so that you can arm yourself for the best conversation with a driver that hopefully it's a good fit for the carrier and then it's a good fit for the driver. And I always think that mutual type of conversation, understanding is really beneficial in the long term. And it's a good segue for us to go over to retention. And as we know, once a driver gets hired, that's where the work really starts, right? Recruitment doesn't stop when the driver gets hired and just hand them off. But I'd love to hear from your experience. What have you found to be successful methods for keeping drivers and retaining them at a fleet?
One of the early on lessons of my career, I can still remember in the boardroom, it was like a light bulb went off, is drivers, they want 4 things in any organization. They want to be paid a fair wage. They want equipment that they like and that works for them to do their job. They want to get home, whether that's home expectation or whatever the job is, delivering on that. And they want to be respected. So that's what we do extremely well here at Jett. Those kind of conversations are happening across every member of the organization. And it's really easy to say those things and define them, but constantly holding yourself accountable to that, making decisions that reflect those 4 categories and continue to reiterate and reinforce and recognize the positives that you see on your team around those. You can't just do it as a one-time sprint. It's got to be embedded in all of your organization.
Yeah, no, that's great. Paid well, equipment, home time, and respected. Oftentimes what we find too in our industry is that carriers lose drivers within the first 30, 60, 90 days is really where we see sometimes the biggest turnover of carriers across different verticals within our industry. And simply maybe because the onboarding process wasn't strong enough to support them. I'd love to get your opinion on, what have you found to be effective for making sure drivers feel supported and connected during that critical window of time?
It's tougher the bigger your organization is and the more touch points from others that are in there. I'm not going to lie, I've got it really easy at Jett with that, just with the nature of our operation. We've got about 15% of our drivers are over the road, out during the week, home on the weekends, most weekends, and all the rest of our drivers are home daily. So we invest hugely, myself on the front end of, again, those really high quality, really in-depth conversations before they even get in the door. So I'm really hard on the drivers that, is this really it's a big decision, and I want you to make the right decision, and I want Jett to make the right decision. And that's why not only on the front end, but operationally, that engagement, the communication, those big 4 I just talked about, that's why we've only lost 3 drivers in this entire year. One I had to term because of safety, really tough. She understood. One that had to move to Florida to help an ill family member, and another road driver got a dream job that's right next to his house and stressed how sad he is to leave Jett. So I'll celebrate all 3 of those. We're safer. We got a better family fit, and we have a better family and financial fit for that gentleman. So, but our average tenure is over 5 years, and that's incredible for this organization that really shows that the big four are being hit consistently.
Mhm.
But again, it takes all of that effort, your ops team, your equipment, your shop, everybody that touches a driver or talks to a driver has to have that in their blood.
Yeah, it kind of leads into my next question to you. You sparked some great discussion on LinkedIn by asking who owns driver retention. I absolutely love that post, and a lot of companies try to push it off to one team or another. And so from your perspective, let's talk about that post that you made. But from your perspective, how should fleets really be thinking about retention ownership?
So defining what we're going to deliver for the driver and then measure ourselves to that. Are we delivering on the pay that we promised? Are we getting them home when they expected to be home? Are we communicating about that for the drivers that are out for extended time frames? And then the equipment, are we prepping trucks for these new drivers to be road ready and be clean and be good to go? Are we keeping them clean while they're out there? Are we keeping up with PMs so that they're not breaking down all the time? So it's engaging in all of those categories and getting, again, that if the top level understands that everybody touches retention and that's ingrained in your corporate culture and not just a fancy blitz or something you talk about when you have high turnover, that's how it really gets done, is holding people accountable to deliver on those expectations for the drivers.
That makes sense. And not having the siloed, the fact across the organization, because it is the full organization. And I believe you said, being clear is kind, talking about expectations. And I agree with that. People don't want to not know, right? And so having clear communications, is it more work up front? Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. A little bit more challenging conversations, 100%. But that's where you see the drivers that will stay and really kind of vet out folks that just wouldn't be a good fit, and vice versa. So turnover really has been a constant battle in our industry. And Brad, when I joined the industry in 2008, and I was sitting with the CEO, is told me at the time, and it still rings true with certain OTR division, for example, but 100% turnover in some companies. And I still see that today. In your view and experience over the years, what's the biggest barrier to retention today in our industry? And why is it still so high?
I think we hurt ourselves the last 4 or 5 years as an industry with riding the waves of the market and the reactions to that. The driver pay skyrocketed as rates skyrocketed. We were throwing out crazy bonuses, crazy pay raises, and really the drivers that they were pretty happy with where they were at. All of a sudden, they're seeing these big dollar signs, and then they start chasing, and then that's not really delivered on. And then they start chasing, and then that's not delivered on. And it just becomes this really terrible cycle of causing our own turnover by racing and then making big adjustments when the market adjusts. So the delivering on those expectations is the start of it, but also the quick turnover at several of these companies, like you had mentioned, it's a waste for them. It's a waste of time for the drivers that they're making a career move, probably a week down on pay to come join that organization, not being delivered on what's promised to them. And then all of a sudden, now you got another truck to fill, you got another driver to recruit. Nobody wins on those. And if any carrier can focus and get that part down, that's going to see that big impact over time on your retention in the right direction.
That's so true. And especially over the past 5 years, like you said, it's with the market swings as they've been. And, we've seen the advertising side. Obviously, we have access to all of the pay for each carrier. And, we've seen pay skyrocket with companies. We've seen that same company kind of have to reduce the pay. And those are challenging conversations to have. And, I often say our biggest competitors are not trucking companies within ourselves. It's actually outside industries where we're losing drivers. They're going into construction. They're going to other different trades that maybe the pay is just about the same, but they're home every night, right? Those jobs are kind of a little bit more often more difficult to find. Our industry, in my opinion, it's very special. It's very connected. And so it's how do we not only bring more people in the industry, but how do we keep them, right?
There's some companies out here doing the right things on their programs with, they may not offer company driver positions, but they'll hire owner operators or have a lease purchase model. I've been really sad to see for our driver force out here, a lot of these, I'll call them shady lease purchase programs where no money out of pocket, no upfront, no ownership, and they're jumping into something they just don't understand of running a business, managing fuel, and that is driving a huge portion of turnover in this industry. With we're setting these drivers up with the dream, and then they're not being equipped with all the hard work, all the financial prep that really needs to happen to run that business effectively. So I'd love to get more word out to really educate drivers, but I'd also like to put out a challenge to those carriers with those programs. There's nothing wrong with a lot of those programs in design, but you really need to make sure you're getting the right candidate and not setting them up for failure, expecting that they're never going to break down or they're never going to have a load issue, things like that, for your program to run efficiently.
I'm really glad you said that, especially on lease purchase specifically, because over the last few months, we've seen more companies working with us on lease purchase. And so a lot of our advertisements, or a good portion, is not only to be a driver audience of 1.5 million drivers that we're able to target on Meta and different platforms, but we see the comments from drivers. And it's unfortunate how many stories we hear about folks that they have worked with a company with lease purchase, and it's no fault of the driver. It's maybe no specific fault of the company without knowing what those expectations should be, right? And having those, this driver maybe never ran their own business. There's going to be breakdowns. It's not rainbows and butterflies, as we know in our industry. And so having those conversations and a clear program to make sure and set those expectations to make sure that that's something that they really want, versus 90 days from now, drivers ticked off and, they're leaving the industry as a whole.
Right.
Really going into the third R, recognition. You've been talking a lot about this and on LinkedIn. And I always say recognition is the secret weapon in retention. And it doesn't have to be high dollars. We have some clients that, the driver of the year gets a brand new F-150, right? That's great.
Awesome.
That's awesome. But it doesn't have to be these lavish gifts. It's oftentimes overlooked in our industry, recognition. And so how do you and your team recognize and cultivate a culture of appreciation for the team members that are, in the office and the drivers that are out there every day?
We were talking about this a little bit earlier on kind of developing your persona of what are some of those intangibles that you'd love to see from the perfect driver. So you could spend time like trying to get ads around that, which is great. It's going to pay off in the long run. But I would argue you should spend a huge portion of your time looking for that in your existing fleet. If you see a driver that's keeping their truck squeaky clean out there on the road, they're doing their pre-trips, they're doing the things that you want to see, like, you should recognize them for them. Just a quick thank you can really go a long way. Even a shout out, social media shout out, things like that. Throw them an extra Jett swag t-shirt that you got laying around that they can wear out at customers and at the truck stop. Call them out in your safety newsletter for getting a clean inspection that we really need for our scores out there. Just those little things and those little moments of recognizing the driver, just it shows them that, hey, you do see that they're doing the right things. It's not always, hey, you were 5 minutes late or you did this or that we're seeing the good things as well. We should celebrate those.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And, often what we see when we work clients' social media pages on their behalf, and it's so exciting working with clients that send us the drivers that they're recognizing this week, and then we put them up on Meta, Facebook, tag the driver, and the folks that are liking it's their wives, it's husbands,
yeah, that's huge.
family. It huge, because if you're out, 2 weeks out of the month, and as a spouse you're at home with the children, you're seeing that your husband, wife is now being recognized by this company, and they're resharing, and there's pride in that, and it's
Big time.
it's free, really, right? It's something that every company can do, just the power of social media and in connecting the road warriors out there that are doing the work with the company, because I feel like oftentimes these drivers feel disconnected. And so where we're at today, August 2025, social media has never been a better place for a company to acknowledge their drivers and tag them and share them. And it's really warms our hearts when we see the families really get involved as well. And that's fun. That's great to see across the board.
I agree.
One piece too about recognizing the drivers. Do you have some form of a system set in place, or is it something that's built in who you are, Brad, as an individual, and built in the Jett culture? How do you recommend a company to really kind of go about recognizing their drivers?
You should equip your team that it's okay to, and encourage it. If you're encouraging those things and you're poking around when you see it, you're leading by example of, even as you're walking the terminal, if you're seeing a driver, just that some sort of positive reinforcement or engagement with them, and really celebrate that with your team. That's one thing I was really proud of when I was working with the venture team, is you would see that the president of the company walking around, shake a driver's hand, know him by name, and have some personal touch point of, hey, this driver's a Cubs fan. How'd the Cubs do last week? Or this driver went on a big fishing trip, and getting an update on that. Like, that personal connection at scale is really hard. And the more you can get that down in the organization, again, huge benefit for us being a more small, tight-knit team. It's a little bit easier for us, but still hard. But the bigger you get, the harder it is, because you have to layer deeper and deeper in your organization that relationship is really built.
And it's knowing the driver by name. And I just want to make one point as we kind of switch gears. We have our driver community that we've built for 13 years now, going on business, which is exciting. And it's interesting. And also featured on Sirius XM, and I speak to drivers, and that's actually how we built our community, was Sirius XM, what Road Truckling, Tim Wrigley show. But it's amazing when we speak to drivers or survey drivers, how many drivers stay with a company because of the spot recognition from leadership management. And they'll say on their hair too, I know I could get better pay at XYZ company, but my wife was sadly in the hospital. The company sent flowers. The manager called me personally, check in on her. And so I'm never leaving. And so really it's, and when you talk about the 3 R's, it's a full circle, it's kind of this full circle feedback loop, and the driver life cycle, if you will. And other drivers hear that from other drivers. And we all know the best type of hire is a referral. So,
yep.
It's interesting because it's the small things that really make an impact for each driver. And it's even more interesting. They'll stay with a company, even if they can get paid a little bit more somewhere else, but be more of a number, not a name. And that makes the difference.
Absolutely.
Brad, as we begin to wrap up, I'd love to ask you, what is one of the most important lessons you've learned over your career since being in the industry around recruitment, retention, and recognition?
Yeah, that's a pretty deep question there, Jackie. I think that the big thing is just you take care of those around you, and we all have our families, we all have our struggles. We're all here to do a job. We all want to do a good job. We want to be seen and we want to be heard as human beings. So if you approach things with empathy, again, being clear is kind on setting that up. I'm saying too many buzzwords here, but bringing all that stuff together and really making that as part of what you show as a leader or whatever role you are in the company, show that to your peers, show that especially to our drivers. We got to take care of these drivers. We're losing them to other industries. We have an aging workforce. We got to attract new ones. So we have to take care of the great men and women out there on the road that are on our team or even on their way out. If they're going on to better pastures and it's a better fit for them, we got to stop and hold these other carriers accountable for getting in the way of the driver bettering their career. So standing up for what's right, being a good human being, and supporting those around you are really lessons that I try to ingrate in every day for my team and try to live out as a leader.
You really do, Brad. And I want to thank you for being a servant leader to our industry. And I know so many folks and whether not, those look up to you. And they're reading what you're posting. And I was on a call with a client earlier and talked about virtual recruiting, and looks like Brad's having success, and maybe we should give it a try. And so I really want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing for the industry. And this is how we are going to be able to continue to grow, because we are the most essential industry in the States. So it's a fantastic industry to be a part of. So thank you for all the work that you do in the space as well.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And as you know, we have a driver community, and they also listen to the show. If a driver was thinking about joining Jett Express, what should they know about their company? We're going to have a link in the description of where they can apply to speak with Brad and his team. But tell us more about the opportunities available at Jett.
Yeah, we're right here in Indianapolis. We've got terminals here in Indianapolis and Elk Grove Village, Illinois. We hire for mainly two positions, either on the road, out during the week, and home on the weekends. Over the road position in amazing trucks. We've got 2022 or newer International Lone Stars, Peterbilt 579s, Kenworth T680s. So we put drivers in great trucks. Our owner's obsessed with black. So if you like black trucks, black swag, that may be for you.
Yeah.
And you're going to be treated extremely well. Like I mentioned, that's my biggest and most favorite thing about our team is just how much we invest in the drivers, how much we care about them. We have so many scenarios that a driver needs to come off the road for a family problem. We train him to be a dispatcher. He's now one of the best dispatchers in the organization. We had a driver coming in that was struggling. He had a backing incident at a customer and was on watch. Another driver stepped in, helped train him, and now he's excited about his skills improving and his safety score rising as a driver. We have a driver that he needed to go to Senegal back home to Africa for an ill family member. We had people pitching in the organization on their own time and effort to make sure he had the supplies, get over there and be super welcome when he was able to return to work. Just those kind of things that they don't happen overnight. You gotta build your culture and just surround yourself with great people. And your opportunity would be to be another great person in our great organization if coming on board.
Fantastic. And to all drivers, there's going to be a link down below to check out Jett Express. I encourage you. We advertise on their behalf, and phenomenal company. Lead it through and through every piece of what we just spoke about. It also happens offline, which is most important. And so, Brad, I want to thank you so much again for all the work you do in our industry. Definitely inspire a large portion of the industry, which is exciting. And I'm excited to see how things evolve over time, and where the industry grows, and looking to you as a thought leader. So, Brad, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Absolutely. And that concludes another episode of Attention Retention. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Remember, the road to success begins with effective recruitment, thoughtful retention, and genuine recognition. Feel free to share this knowledge with your peers and industry colleagues. Your sharing can make a difference. Together, we can empower the industry to thrive. Until next time.